Marisha here, continuing my series on things that are free in London. Today I'm going to talk about what I'm calling second tier museums. Now, these are museums that are not as big as the big eight that I talked about in my previous video, but are still sizable enough and of top quality that you would spend, I think, at least an hour in them, again, depending on your particular approach to museums. So the first one I'm going to talk about, it's not technically a museum, it's the British Library, but they do have a room of what they call like their treasures, where you can go for free and you can see copies of the Gutenberg Bible, a Shakespeare First Folio, the Magna Carta, dating back to 1215, and it has its own separate room that tells you kind of all about the history of the Magna Carta, has some interactive screens that tell you some of the laws that were passed in the Magna Carta that are still sort of applicable today, and just how monumental that particular document is in the way that it sort of laid the groundwork for, again, a lot of what is now kind of standard law in the UK and also in the US. Um, but in addition to those sort of highlights that I would say, Gutenberg Bible, First Folio, Shakespeare, there are a lot of religious texts. So you'll see lots of copies of Torahs, Qurans, Bhagavad Gita, Bibles, like old ones that are like have the illuminated text and are really beautiful to look at. But you'll also see more contemporary things. They have, for example, pieces of like a Monty Python script with handwritten notes in it, some Beatles stuff, and then things in between. In between Shakespeare and Monty Python, you've got like Jane Austen and all sorts of different kind of particularly British writers, but not solely British literature. In addition, you have nonfiction texts. So there are some old, like medical texts, for example. It really is it is a treasury of these amazing, important historical texts. And so I think that anybody who is literate should go and check it out and be able to sort of enjoy it and learn some things. Now, the British Library does, like most of these places, have exhibits that you can buy tickets to and visit those exhibits as well. So, when you go, you might discover that they have something on that you're willing to spend money to see. I went to an exhibit there that was on kind of like fairy tales and folklore, and that's really something that I'm really passionate about. So it was totally worth it for me to go to that. But again, you don't have to. It's totally worth it just to go for the free entry to the Treasury room. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the Wallace Collection. Now, this is mostly an art museum. It's located in what was essentially a family home of like the Wallace family, really a mansion. And it's the artworks that they collected over several generations. And now it's a museum that's open to the public and it's free. Again, they do have special exhibits that you pay tickets for, that you like buy a ticket for, but the vast majority of the museum, basically the first and second floor, or the ground and first floor if you're British, are all free, open to the public. It's mostly 18th and 19th century artworks. There are some things that are older, going back into, I would say, like the Renaissance. Um, a lot of paintings, sculpture, they have ceramics, but they also have a separate kind of, it's actually several rooms, almost a wing of the first floor or ground floor, that's an armory. So if you like military history, you'll be able to see lots of spears and swords and maces and clubs and pistols and suits of armor, including a horse armor. I think they have a suit of horse armor that is like the oldest, most complete one in the world. I don't think it's like fully complete, but like mostly, and um, dates back to maybe like the 15th century or something like that. So that's a lot of fun if you're interested in military things like that. But most of it, where the art is displayed, because it was a home, right? You're walking through rooms that are ornately decorated. So it's not just like an art museum with plain white walls. You're walking into a room that has a historic wallpaper that's sort of ornate. Usually, in some of the rooms, you have this really almost rococo fireplace with a huge mirror above it on the mantelpiece, up on the mantle, and then maybe some really ornate like clocks and things like that, really luxurious drapes hanging from the windows. So, in addition to the art, the rooms themselves are kind of art, right? They're beautiful to look at as well. So it really is a great kind of atmosphere. Um, and I would say Wallace Collection, you could easily spend 2 hours there, I think. Next is the Horniman. The Horniman is a little bit farther afield. So, Wallace Collection, British Library are central London, really easy to get to. Horniman is a little farther afield. So, that's something that you're going to want to visit if you happen to be in that area of London. It's kind of in southwest London. Or if you do some more research on the Horniman, you think, oh, this is like a place that I definitely want to go to. It is a pretty sizable museum. It tends to be kind of a natural history museum with some cultural history as well. So there are several rooms with kind of stuffed animals, again, like taxidermied animals, not toy animals. They're most famous for their giant walrus that they have on display. He's great to take a selfie with. But they also have another whole section that is kind of cultural history, where you kind of go around the world and see clothing and other artifacts from various cultures around the world. Um, and then they do have an aquarium. It costs extra to go to the aquarium. I got in for free with my student art pass. So if you get your hands on a student art pass or a national art pass, the aquarium's free. I think it was maybe like £5 or something if you didn't have an art pass extra to go into the aquarium. So there is an aquarium there. They also will have a special exhibit that that costs money to see. When I went, to give you an example of the kinds of things that they have, the special exhibit was dinosaurs made out of Legos, and some of them were like full size kind of dinosaurs. Um, and then they also have just a kind of large grounds and some gardens. When I went, it wasn't the best weather to enjoy that, but I could see if you went in late spring or early summer, I would recommend packing a lunch, and so you can have a picnic on the grounds. And there is a kind of like a pond as well, so I can see it being very picturesque in good weather. Definitely a museum that is good for children. It definitely sort of plays into being a museum that is friendly for children and is geared toward kind of teaching them. They also have a separate wing with musical instruments and like the history of musical instruments. So there is a good variety of things at the Horniman. Um, Next is the Sir John Soane Museum. This is also in central London. It's close to the Inns of Court, kind of in the Holborn area of London. This is another one that was basically some rich dude's collection, Sir John Soane. It's his house and all of the stuff that he collected in his lifetime. I can't remember, but I think he might have had a hand in establishing the British Museum. But he was, if not, he was definitely that kind of a guy in terms of his wealth and his renown at the time when he was alive. And so you go into his house, and it really is just this mishmash of things that he collected. I mean, there's a stone sarcophagus, there's all types of different like sculptures and statues and paintings and things, and it's sort of, it can seem almost a little claustrophobic. It's definitely a place where you do not want to go with a giant backpack, because they're not going to let you take your giant backpack in, because you will definitely, if you turn, it'll like hit something and knock it off the wall. Just so you're aware of kind of what the atmosphere is like. It is a little bit tight, um, but definitely worth it if you are interested in like old relics and just eclectic mixes of things that some, rich Victorian would have collected over his lifetime. And again, it's free, right? And it's really well located if you're spending the day in central London and maybe you are going to the British Museum or you are going to the Dickens Museum, which is not free but is worth it if you're into Dickens. It's in kind of that area where it's easy to hit a couple of things that are nearby. And then finally, the Royal Academy of Arts. Not surprisingly, it's an art museum. Again, they always have some sort of special exhibit that you buy a ticket for, but the main stuff is free and it's in two wings. I prefer the north wing, that tends to be with where some of the older stuff is. So, in that area, for example, they have this huge kind of like life size or even bigger than life size replica of The Last Supper. Opposite it, they have again huge paintings that depict the works of the apostles in Acts and a lot of other kind of paintings that are, you would say, are from maybe 17th, 18th, 19th century and sculptures. A lot of the stuff in the Royal Academy of Arts are kind of reproductions because they were used for the art students to kind of study. And so you'll see, I think they have like a reproduction of a statue of Lao Kun and his sons, for example. Um, so that's all really interesting to look at, but they do have original artwork as well on display. Recently, they had a special showing and it was free of I think it's called Fiery June. I could have the name wrong. Flaming June. Anyway, it's a famous work by Frederick Leighton. It was on loan from a museum in the Caribbean, either Cuba or Puerto Rico, while that museum is undergoing renovation. So it's on loan, but it's free to see. It's gorgeous. And for me, it was worth it just to take a trip there just to see that. I mean, obviously, I'm going to roam around and look at the other things because again, it's free to look at their art there. Sometimes they'll have things on display that I think are by current students as well. And they have two gift shops, and they're pretty good gift shops. There's especially the main one in the South Wing. That's You go up the stairs to get to it, and it's pretty sizable and it has a lot of really cool stuff. A little spendy, but if you are someone who likes like art museum gift shop types of things, you'll definitely find something there. So those are again what I would call second tier, not as big as the big eight, but certainly big enough to spend at least an hour in them. The exception might be Sir John Soane Museum. I can see someone maybe only taking half an hour there, but again, depending on how much you're interested in the things, you could spend an hour there. And some of the other ones, Horniman for sure, you would spend, I think, at least 2 hours in them. I will have more of this series. I have lots and lots of free things, and I've been working on compiling them into like sort of categories. And so, some things to look forward to. I'll have one that's all science stuff that's free. I've got one that's annual events, historic estates, lots of different sort of areas that I'm trying to divide all of the free things into. I actually started making a list of all of the things that I've done that are free, and it's kind of overwhelming. There is a lot in London. So stay tuned for more information on that. The series might get interrupted occasionally to talk about other things. Like I did just go back to the States and looked up some prices of groceries in Aldi so I can compare them to prices in Aldi here, for example. But definitely there's more free London coming down the pike. In the meantime, like, subscribe, tell your friends how gnarly this channel is, and I'll see you next time.